Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. In this episode, my guest is Guy Barker, a UK businessman behind a project set to bring a new terrace to the roof of Prague's 19th century Rudolfinum. Mr. Barker's Arkona Capital, a real estate investment company active in a number of EU countries, is a sponsor of the Czech Philharmonic, which calls the magnificent building home. When we met at Arkona Capital's offices, Mr. Barker also discussed a notable development it's involved with in Kiev and what led him to move to Prague. That's in this edition of Prague Talk. You're one of the founders of Arkona Capital. For our listeners and readers who don't know that, what is Arkona Capital?
We're a real estate fund management business. We set it up in Munich in 2007. The people behind that setup had all worked together in banking and in fund management beforehand. So 2007 seemed a good idea at the time. Turned out to be a very challenging time to set a business up. But we've come through that, and we now operate a real estate fund management business across Northern Europe with offices in Holland, Germany, Poland, Czech Republic and Bulgaria.
I know that you previously were based in Germany. What led you to make the move to Prague?
Tax and women, although in fact it would be appropriate to put that the other way round. I think as one gets older, maybe those priorities change. But there was a sort of personal reason to move here. And financially, certainly a few years ago, the tax load as someone living in Germany was epic compared to Prague. And so that was a further inducement to move. But that was quite a long time ago now. 2007 I moved from Germany to Czech Republic, and I've in no way regretted it. I'm more and more comfortable here the longer I'm here, and I'm very positive about the country, actually much more positive than most Czechs are.
And what is it that you most like about living and working in Czechia?
Let's start off with the comparison, because I quite often get asked that. Why would you move to the Czech Republic when you were living in Germany before? Well, I think there is a different vibe. Germany is a remarkably rule-based place, and if that's not entirely deep in your psyche, and the Brits are slightly cynical about rules, and I think their attitude is much closer to the Czechs in an attitude to life, and also I think a sense of humour, and so I find the culture here more accommodating than the German one, although I do speak fluent German and I have considerable difficulty with the Czech language. So despite the language issue, I just find the culture here more accommodating than Germany, where I also lived for 15 years.
How much property does Arkona Capital own here in the Czech Republic?
At the moment, we probably have about 250 million euros under management, maybe a little bit more. We have a big portfolio of hypermarkets across the whole country. We have an office portfolio which used to be quite large but has been substantially reduced, which was regional, bought from Telefonica in 2008. So we're in Chomutov and Strakonica and Ostrava and Zlín, so very regional. We have a couple of office buildings here in Prague and a very big and quite exciting residential project on the eastern edge of Prague in Úvaly.
How does investing in Czechia compare to, for example, investing in Germany or the Netherlands in terms of yield?
Traditionally, and the reason that we originally came here, and I was representing German institutions when I first invested here in 1998. We were actually the first international investors into the Czech Republic. The yields were traditionally higher. Now they are sort of not. In certain areas they're lower. Generally there is a little bit of a margin, But I think that doesn't reflect that. That's perhaps more comparable or more due to the overall size of the market compared to, say, Germany, than it is to weaknesses or differences in the market in terms of risk. The Czech market, the Czech real estate market, is really quite strong, and at the moment that is due to the strength of its domestic purchasers in comparison to, say, Poland or Romania or Bulgaria or Hungary. That solidity of the Czech domestic investment scene is a strong factor behind, let's say, solid pricing here. And there isn't really a great deal of difference. I mean, at the moment, the German market's much weaker than the Czech market. And for certain segments of the market, you get actually higher yields in Germany. Not necessarily in all sectors, but certainly in some.
You have a project in Kiev. Arkona Property Fund has acquired a site in the city. This will be the first real estate investment by a Western private fund in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion by the Russians. Why is now the right time for this kind of project?
Well, is now the right time is the question. And I think it's too early to say. In 5 years' time, benefit of hindsight hindsight's a wonderful thing. There's a little bit more to this than perhaps meets the eye. We were buying a package of property from a London-listed company called SPDI a few years ago, and the deal assumed that we would buy the whole package. When we came to move ahead with the deal in 2021, the sellers were not able to fulfill various legal conditions for the Ukrainian site at that time. So they agreed that instead of the whole package deal, which included properties in Romania and Bulgaria, all going through at the same time, we would buy the Romanian and Bulgarian sites and we would complete the Ukrainian purchase when they had fulfilled the legal conditions. So the other deals went through in 2021. The war started in 2022. The conditions still hadn't been fulfilled. So we could potentially have pulled out of the deal. There is a legal concept called force majeure, external forces out of your control, and full-scale invasion by Russia of the country where you intended to invest could perhaps have been construed as force majeure. Legally, that wasn't entirely clear. And so had we gone down the route of pulling out of the deal, there may have been legal consequences. We didn't particularly want to investigate that. But we did feel that there was a moral obligation on us to complete the sale, bearing in mind that we'd done the first part of it. However, we were quite keen that if we did go through with the deal, that the pricing would reflect current circumstances. It took us a while to be able to revalue the site. We did find, in the end, parties that were able to do that in Kiev. So that happened last year. The conditions were fulfilled by the sellers. And so following the revaluation, completion of the conditions, we then made the decision, right, let's go through with it now. And there is no doubt now that the situation, oddly, bearing in mind what happened last week with at a political level, 3 years ago, it was not clear what was going to happen to Kiev. At one point, it looked as though it was going to fall to the Russians. Now, I don't think it is going to fall to the Russians. I don't think there is an expectation that Kiev will not be Ukrainian and under Ukrainian control in the near term or medium term. Let's not talk about the long term. So under those circumstances, I think there is an element of clarity. And it is central Kiev, but it's not a big deal in cash terms. It creates a lot of interest PR-wise, which is always good, I think. And so we felt, let's do this and let's make something positive out of it. And I will be in Kiev in a month's time celebrating the deal with our local team, and I'm very much looking forward to that trip.
One major reason I wanted to speak to you is because you're the person behind a plan to build a terrace on the roof of the Rudolfinum, the grand building by the river here in Prague. What's the genesis of that whole idea?
A few years ago, we were looking to sponsor one of the major art institutions in Prague, and the Czech Philharmonic was very positive about our potential engagement, which mildly surprised me because we're not a big company. And bearing in mind that their major sponsors are Česká spořitelna and Skoda and Chairs and so on, I thought, well, why us? But they were very, very interested in a relationship with us. And when we first visited the team there, David Maracek, the director, gave me the opportunity. In fact, we were taken up to the roof terrace of the building. So it's there at the moment. It's 800 square meters of roof terrace with the most, in a city of spectacular views as Prague is, the ones from the roof terrace on the Rudolfinum are fabulous. Over the Charles Bridge, up to the castle, east over the Jewish cemetery in the old town, it's all there below you. And so it's a knockout view. The terrace is there. The access to it is inadequate for modern public use. It has no services up there. It's not possible to use it in a sort of regular, open to the public type way. And I said, well, why don't you sort this out? He said, David said, well, we're musicians. And the building is owned by the state, and the state supports the orchestra, but the state is at the moment not willing to provide additional, or unlikely to produce additional funds to make the roof terrace accessible for the general public, much as we would like to be able to use it as to support the Czech Philharmonic. And I thought, well, we can do this. This isn't particularly difficult. Well, that was then. It is actually quite difficult, but if you'd like me to, I'll tell you where we go from here.
That's my biggest question in regard to the terrace project, because what I saw online, it was due to be finished maybe 3-4 years ago.
Well, we started the fundraising. Yeah, just over 4 years ago. We thought, well, let's start the fundraising, and then along came COVID, and that rather hampered us because we wanted to have fundraising concerts and so on, and it wasn't possible to do anything. So that delayed us for a bit. And then we started the fundraising, and we had some success. And then the Russians invaded Ukraine. And fundraising for elite culture, when you have hundreds of thousands of refugees coming across the border and humanitarian crises evolving in Ukraine, also seemed inappropriate. So we felt it was not right to be trying to push it hard then. That was then. We've moved forward, and now, without wishing to be too specific, we've secured the funding. We have the funding. We have other issues rolling up in that the Monument Protection Authority and the planners and other people concerned with the building, which is at the heart of Czech culture, the Rudolfinum, for all sorts of reasons, are anxious that any work that is done there is done not only reflecting the sensitivity of the building, but that the materials that are used in it are appropriate to its original construction and use, rather than just perhaps a replacement of what's there at the moment. And that's sort of given us some issues to deal with, which we think we've now coped with. Another challenge that we have is that the building is used every day by the Rudolfinum Gallery, the Czech Philharmonic, and then at other times of the year, the Prague Spring, the Dvořák Festival. There are a lot of issues in doing work around the building that need to be dealt with. If we combine that, however, with the fact that the roof is now in major need of repair and actually needs to be replaced anyway, it looks as though we have a confluence of interests coming together which will enable us to move ahead with the project with the aim of completing it in 2026. We are still waiting for confirmation of discussions with various parties on that. The work's already started. We did a first phase in October, November last year, and the remaining work we think will take about 14 months, and we hope that the second phase will be able to begin in June this year, with the aim of completing it at the end of next year in conjunction with repair work that's necessary anyway.
Is part of the financing coming from sponsorship of the famous statues or busts that are on the roof there?
An element of it, yes, that is the case. But the majority of the sponsorship, to be fair, is coming from two institutional it's coming from two big name players, let's put it that way, which have a long-term history of supporting the building and the Czech Philharmonic, and I think they're better able to deal with the publicity of it than I am when we get to that point.
How will it be used? Will people be able to go there, visitors, for example, in the same way they can go up the Old Town Hall tower? Will tourists be able to go and pay 200 crowns and go on the roof?
We like the idea of the phrase full public access. The Rudolfinum is a working building that needs to be obviously carefully managed. At the moment, there's a cafe in the Rudolfinum, which is open to the public most of the time. There's the gallery there, which has a series of tremendous exhibitions. The latest one I was at the opening of 2 weeks ago. That's really on a roll at the moment, I think, the gallery. So there are competing or overlapping interests in the building that need to be managed. The aim, I think, is to reach a suitable compromise where the public do have access to it. I wouldn't say all the time. I don't think that will be the case. On a daily basis, I think that would be nice. But we will provide a physical solution that would enable that to be possible. Whether it is then done is not for me to call.
Well, I look forward to visiting it sometime in the next couple of years.
I would hope that you will be able to join us for the opening party in the, let's say, mid-September 2026. That's our current planning date.
It's in my diary. Many thanks indeed to Guy Barker for speaking to me for Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you've enjoyed this episode and are new to the pod, why not check out some of the 120 plus earlier editions in the series and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much indeed for joining me on Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.